ladies and gentlemen, the biggest, the most talented, successful lawyer in America, Mr. Tom Mesereau. Good evening, Tom. Welcome back to King Jordan Radio.
Well, hi, Jordan. Thank you for that rather large introduction. I hope I can live up to it. Good to talk to you again.
Kerry's here. He's hanging foot. But,
hey, Tom, how are you?
Kerry, you're
good to hear from you.
Listen, before we say anything else, I want you to know that Kerry was in the courtroom for every day of Michael Jackson's criminal trial in 2005. I had a chance to observe him before court began, during court, and afterwards, and I've never seen a more professional, loyal, dedicated individual when it comes to Michael Jackson's security than Kerry Anderson. He was an absolute tribute to his profession. He was honorable. He was loyal. He was just dedicated to support Michael Jackson, and I want all the fans who are listening to know what a wonderful man Kerry Anderson is.
Well, I appreciate that, Tom. Thank you so much.
You know, Lloyd, Michael Jackson had a lot of people in his life who turned on him, betrayed him, manipulated him, used him, betrayed his confidences. It made him, in many ways, very lonely because he didn't know who to trust. But one person he always could trust was Kerry Anderson. And Kerry's somebody I trust, too. So I want to make sure he gets his due. Because I saw him the entire 6 months I lived up in Santa Maria, California, and this man really was a true professional. Well, as you can already guess, I'm outraged by it. It's just another attempt, in my opinion, to get a bunch of money by someone who's made statements for years that Michael never improperly touched him, never did anything illegal, never did anything criminal, never sexually abused him. This person, as I recall, made statements like that for years. And all of a sudden, years after Michael's death, to jump on a lawsuit and change the story completely, like Wade Robson did, leaves a very bad feeling in me. I think it's just an outrage. I hope these lawsuits get defeated. I have my doubts, however, as I've said before, what the lawyers who are handling them are going to do, because if you really look back in history, in 93, Howard Weitzman was Michael Jackson's lawyer. He signed the settlement agreement. He appeared at the news conference, the press conference, with Larry Feldman, the plaintiff's lawyer, to announce that they had settled. John Branca was not Michael Jackson's litigator in the suit, but he was his business lawyer and an advisor. And then a couple of years later, these people were around, as I recall, when the Jason Francia case was settled. And a law firm that settled those suits was a law firm that Weitzman had been a partner with, Cat & Muchin. So the history that these lawyers have when it comes to molestation allegations against Michael Jackson is not a very strong one. They've never been willing to go to trial and win these molestation cases. Now, you fast forward to the present. The lawyer representing Robson and Safechuck is a very, very good plaintiff's lawyer. Mr. Gradstein is one of the best in Los Angeles. He's very smart, very aggressive, and has been very successful. I think Gradstein knows the history of Weitzman and Branca and the Cat & Muchin law firm. And I think he's salivating because if this case isn't thrown out by a judge, I think Gradstein believes these people will pay money like they always have in the past. And I might add one other thing. The Cat & Muchin firm were part of my defense team when we were heading towards trial in 2005, and they quit the team, not long before the trial started. Now, you'd have to ask them what their reasons were, but I don't think they thought we were going to win. But, you'd have to ask them what their reasons are. I don't know particularly. All I'm telling you is that Henry Gradstein is a smart lawyer, and this is a very creative lawsuit he put together to try and sue Michael Jackson years after he's dead. But I think he's looking across the courtroom at Weitzman and Branca and the lawyers representing the estate, And I think he's salivating because he doesn't think they have the courage to try a case like this after the settlements they entered into in the past. So that really bothers me. But, these allegations are a complete outrage. They make a mockery of the legal system. They make a mockery of the truth, and they really, really upset me.
But
I haven't been following the case very closely. I haven't been looking at the documents that are filed. But if it's the Gradstein that I know, he's a very accomplished trial lawyer, and he knows what he's doing. And I think he needs to be up against strong people who are willing to try this kind of case and beat him. And I don't know if the lawyers representing the estate are of that caliber. I don't think they have that reputation because of those settlements.
Well, I have hope that they will not settle. I mean, I think Branca and Weitzman and McLean are fully aware of how that first settlement really impacted Michael's image negatively. I mean, if they really wanted to settle with Robson, they could have done it when he first came out, because Robson tried to originally, when he came out with his case, he tried to file it under seal and keep it quiet, which goes against his claim that he's doing it to speak up and speak the truth, where if you actually read his documents, you'll find out that he tried to keep everything quiet. So if they really wanted to settle, they could have done it then. So I admire them for the fact that...
I don't agree with you. I think if they had offered to settle then, they would have looked so weak that the number would have been astronomical. I think they had to, issue the press releases they did, and they had to fight it. But my concern is that if a judge doesn't throw it out, they may try to settle it confidentially, because I don't think they have the guts to try it.
Well, I mean, the burden of proof is on Robson and Safechuck. At the moment, the estate doesn't have to do anything. It's all on them. So I guess you're right. The moment of truth will be when the judge decides if this case goes forward or not.
Yeah, I hope I'm wrong. I hope they get a judge to throw it out. It's being filed too late. But so far that hasn't happened. And, again, I'm not following the case closely. And maybe these lawyers will, get some courage and actually be willing to try it. But I think that if a judge doesn't throw it out, I think Branca and Weitzman, like they did in the past, are going to pay money in a confidential settlement to get rid of it. Remember, it's not their money that they're paying, it's the estate's money. And I think they'll be too afraid that they might lose. They'll be too afraid about the publicity coming out of a trial. And I think they'll do just like they did in 93. I'm told that they're trying to blame it on Johnny Cochran, that they're telling other people it was Johnny's idea. But Weitzman signed the agreement. It's on the Internet. I know someone that has an original copy, and he appeared at the press conference. And although Branca wasn't, a litigator at the time, Branca was advising Michael. And I know Randall Sullivan in his book reports that Branca didn't think Michael physically could handle a trial and emotionally could handle a trial. Again, I wasn't around at that time. I don't know exactly what happened, but I don't know. I just fear that they're going to want to pay money, throw it under the rug like they did before, and it could be a disaster. I mean, there are people who were abused. There are adults who were abused when they were children. You've seen that abuse scandal in the Catholic Church, and many people who were abused and lived in denial. They didn't want to admit it. They didn't want to face it. And the law is becoming more flexible for them. Laws have been changing in many states, give them a much longer amount of time to file a lawsuit. So I have to assume that that's what Robson's lawyer and Safechuck's lawyer are doing.
Yeah, Tom, everybody's interested with these allegations. And we just did have Geraldine Hughes, who wrote the book Redemption, and she has a lot of good stuff as it pertains to Michael's innocence in regards to the 93 charge.
Yeah, she's been a very loyal supporter of Michael, and when I was preparing to defend Michael in his criminal case in 2004, 2005, I did read her book, and she had some very helpful, some information that was very helpful to me. in preparing to defend what the prosecutors were going to throw at us. And I was getting every book I could find about Michael's life, about these false allegations, and trying to arm myself in advance of trial. And her book was very helpful to me. She's been very loyal to Michael Jackson. It does factor in. I called Wade Robson as my first witness to start our defense case. And as I've said before in some interviews, when you decide to put on a defense case, which you don't have to do, in a criminal case in the United States, the prosecution has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the defense can, decide to put on witnesses or not put on witnesses, just like a defendant can testify or choose not to testify. But I decided we had to put on a defense case because I did not want to, the possibility of a hung jury and Michael having to go to trial again, and I decided to put on our own case. And when you do that, you want to certainly start strong and end strong. And I started with one of our strongest witnesses, Wade Robson. He was adamant that he had not been inappropriately touched. He had not been molested. He was very supportive of Michael. And I called Wade. I called his mother. I called his sister. They were all positive about Michael Jackson. And so when he came out with this change in attitude, I was just shell-shocked. I couldn't believe it. But the answer to your question is that testimony is going to be very important in that case. Just like his statements on television where he gave some interviews and said Michael had never touched him and that the allegations were ridiculous. All of those can be used to impeach him and to contradict him in trial. You have to understand that I met Michael during his lowest point in his life. I met him in his hour. I met him when he was facing charges that could have meant that he died in prison. And the charges were very disturbing. Being charged with child molestation is worse than being charged with murder. It's just a horrible, horrible allegation. And he wasn't only charged with child molestation, he was charged with providing alcohol to a cancer-stricken child to set him up for molestation. He was charged with conspiracy to falsely imprison a family, to abduct children, to commit criminal extortion. These were horrible allegations. So I met Michael at his darkest hour, and Michael was very suspicious of many people who had crossed his path. He felt people were after his catalog. He felt the media wanted to make a fortune on watching him be destroyed and carted off to prison. He was suspicious of many people who had crossed his path. I don't want to give a bunch of names. But the names were very numerous. He didn't know who to trust, who to turn to, who was behind this. He was very verbal that he thought Sony was involved, that he thought the effort was to get his catalog, and he had trouble trusting anyone. In the middle of the trial, he would call Susan Yu, my law partner, who was so important to this acquittal. I mean, she did all the hard work, all the analyzing documents, analyzing witness statements, and she helped me prepare to try this case like nobody could have, and she just, we couldn't have acquitted him without her incredible work. And he would call her in the middle of the night, and he would call me then in the middle of the night, and he was crying, and he would say, you guys are doing so well, please don't let them pay you off. And I would say, Michael, what are you talking about? He said, I know they're going to offer you millions because they want me to go down, and they see that you're doing a great job, and Susan Yu is doing a great job, and they're going to pay you. I said, Michael, nobody's paying me a dime. This is not the kind of person I am. And I got the feeling he was so used to people betraying him. He was so used to, hoping that someone was his friend, and then suddenly they have their hand out, or they're trying to get a project out of him, or they're trying to get money from him. And, loneliness, unfortunately, was a major issue with Michael, because with all that fame and talent and fortune came all the profiteers and the people who were governed by greed and selfishness. And as I've said before, the Chris Tucker and Macaulay Culkin, I will never forget, because these were two young entertainers, at the height of their fame, wealthy, celebrated wherever they went. And, they had people around them telling them, don't get involved in that trial, don't help Michael Jackson, he's going down, your career is going to be tarnished. And they both said to me, separately from each other, that whenever Michael needs us, we're going to be there. We don't care what anybody advises us to do. And I saw managers and lawyers, agents advising them, don't get involved. And they didn't care what they said. They were going to help Michael, and they wanted the truth to come out. But, you only find out when you're in trouble who your friends really are. And Michael was devastated about a number of people who just were not there to help him in the way he expected. Now, Liz Taylor was physically ill. She was always supportive, but she was physically ill. Stevie Wonder
was in a wheelchair.
Yeah, Stevie Wonder was very supportive. He was ready to run right up. I didn't need him as a witness because he hadn't been a witness to any of the actual events that were involved in the trial as Macaulay Culkin and Chris Tucker had. But those guys, boy, they were just something. I saw Chris Tucker about a little less than a year ago. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I gave him a big hug, and I told him just what I just said now, that, I'll never forget your loyalty. You could easily have just not gotten involved, and he appreciated it because he stood up for Michael. He was the last witness I called. As I said before, if you're putting on a defense case, you want to start strong and end strong. Sometimes you have witnesses that aren't as strong as others, but you want to start strong and end strong. I began my case with Wade Robson. I ended it with Chris Tucker. And they were very strong witnesses for Michael Jackson. That's why just, Wade Robson's turnaround, it just shocked me.
My name is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Calling from?
I'm calling from New England, and I'm going to be a little bit of a different caller here. I actually believe the accusers, Wade Robson and James Safechuck. What bothers me is being...
Thank you. That was some guy that just wants to believe the accusers. He should go to a different place. Okay. Tom, somebody started out the comment by saying he believed all the accusers, so I had to let him go.
Well, I would have been happy to have a discussion with him. I would have been happy to let him know what these people said in the past, and how suddenly, when Michael's not around to defend himself, they file civil suits looking for money. I would have been happy to discuss it with him.
Yeah, there's a reputation that there's this internet troll that is trying to get, he opened up a Wade, and I'm not going to give him that much credit. There's this one person that, all over the net trying to be a Wade Robson supporter and, going under different aliases. So I'd rather give him...
It's a free country. We live in a democracy. We have a First Amendment. People have a right to their opinions within certain limits, and they have a right to express them. And, if somebody wants to express a contrary opinion to me, I can talk to them about it. But I think they better have some...
If I know who it is, I think the direction on a night like tonight, it's not called for. Maybe another night, but...
Well, the time to prosecute someone for perjury has probably run. And so I don't think they would be able to, the statute of limitations is what they call the law that says how much time you have to either prosecute someone for a crime or how much time you have to sue someone in the civil court, and the time has run for that. But I also don't think that the prosecutors in Santa Barbara want to even touch this case again. I think they were humiliated so badly. Remember, Michael was acquitted of 14 charges. He was originally indicted on 10 felony counts, but at the end of the trial, the judge instructed the jury that along with those 10 felony counts, they could consider what are called 4 lesser-included misdemeanor counts. And when it came to the last 4 felonies, if they acquitted him of those felonies, they had to then look at what are called lesser-included misdemeanors and render a verdict on them. So they acquitted Michael 14 times, 10 felony counts and 4 misdemeanor counts. It was complete humiliation for the prosecutors and the police up in Santa Maria and Santa Barbara County. So I don't think they'd want to touch this case again for anything. I think it just brings back bad memories of all the money and time they spent, the way they were humiliated before the whole world, and I don't think they'd ever touch the case. But it's probably too late to go after anybody for perjury. I don't think, Mr. Robson, when he testified, was one of their favorite people, because anyone who testified for the defense, they were upset with. But they're not going to touch this one. They really aren't.
Okay, you mentioned that before.
By the way, just to think a little bit about your question, because my position is he didn't lie on the witness stand. He told the truth. Michael never touched him. My position is he's not telling the truth now. I believe he didn't perjure himself. I believe he told the absolute truth in that trial in a court of law, in front of a jury of 12 people, in front of a judge. He took the oath, and he said Michael had never inappropriately touched him at any time. He even said it was the allegations were ridiculous. So my position is there was no perjury. He told the truth.
Okay, Tom, your thoughts on Michael's friend Chris Tucker?
Well, as I said before, Chris Tucker is a wonderful, wonderful person, a man of character. You only know who your friends are when you're in trouble and find out they're really going to stick up for you when the chips are down, and that's the kind of guy Chris is. So I will go to my grave with total respect for Chris Tucker and Macaulay Culkin, as I said before. They stood up for their friend when he could not have been in more trouble, and when everybody was telling him it's not good for you to support him. Chris is just the greatest. And you know something, when I was listening to that quote, I just, I was a little envious in a way, because I didn't know Michael during a lighthearted time. I knew him when, he was facing prison. And I knew him when he was terrified and just scared to death of what this whole process was going to do to him and his children. So I didn't know him during a lighthearted time. I saw the childlike fun Michael on a couple of occasions, and Susan, you and Michael and I would laugh on occasion at some various things that happened. But for the most part, this was serious business. His life was in my hands. You had the whole power of law enforcement after him, all those sheriffs and DAs and police, and they were working with the FBI, and they were working with Interpol, the International Police Force, and they were loading up everything they could. 70 sheriffs raided Neverland in November of 2003, So I met him during his darkest hour. I met him when he was just terrified. So I didn't have enough opportunity to be lighthearted with him. It must have been wonderful to have known Michael at a time when he was relaxed and joking around and lighthearted. That must have been just terrific. I really didn't have that experience with him for the most part.
Yeah, and that's definitely a shame.
Well, first of all, when I got into the case, I didn't know what to think. My approach to a case is I don't believe anyone at first. I don't believe my client. I don't believe the accusers. I don't believe witnesses. I approach a case with the idea that I don't believe anybody at the moment. I'm going to approach it objectively, and I'm going to figure out myself what I think happened and what I think the defense should be. And one thing about Michael, I started talking to him about these allegations, and I started studying him as a person and trying to get an intuitive feel for the kind of person he was. And, pretty quickly I said to myself, I don't believe this person's capable of doing this. They're calling this man a monster. I don't believe it. As I said before, a lot of people remember he was charged with child molestation. They don't remember how horrible these charges were. That they were saying that he would take a child with cancer and give him alcohol, which can make the cancer even worse, just to soften him up for perversion, for child molestation, that he would falsely imprison a family, that he would commit criminal extortion. These charges were just awful. And it didn't take me very long in talking to him to say to myself, this doesn't make a lot of sense. It just doesn't seem like this guy is capable of this kind of thing. And then the more I dug into the evidence, the documents, the statements, the way the prosecutors were going to present their case, I just said to myself, something's wrong here from A to Z. However, the whole world thought we were going to lose. I mean, the whole world thought, you can't win that case. This is a courthouse with a very high conviction rate, very conservative people. They've thrown resources at him that are monumental. They've got the media behind them, trying to condition and influence the jury.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people thought we didn't have a chance. When I really had looked at this evidence, I thought we had a good chance. But we had to overcome that. We had to overcome public opinion. We had to overcome, the fact that the media was doing everything they could to see him convicted. Because it would make a great story for them to have someone reach the height.
The press was always against that.
Yeah, so and plus just the charges alone really bother people, really bother people. We had to be very careful in how we approached it, what jury we picked, and how we strategized the case. But that's how I approached it. But I just have to tell you, when I looked at how awful these charges were and I started studying this person and just getting a feel for him, I would walk out of our meeting and say, it doesn't seem like this guy's capable of it. But something's wrong here, Yeah. And something's wrong. They were false charges. They were malicious false charges.
For money.
And now your question, was he nervous? Very nervous. Of course he was. He was very nervous. Listen, Michael was a very sensitive, kind, delicate, creative spirit. He wasn't a person.
He only wanted to be nice. He only wanted to be nice and spread love like that.
He was kind. He was gentle. He was caring, and he was creative. He wasn't built to sit in a courtroom for 5 months, 5 days a week, hearing people claim he was a monster. He wasn't built for that, and it took a terrible toll on him. Terrible.
And my question to Tom is more about the Martin Bashir interview that Michael agreed to. And I was just wondering if you could tell people why he agreed to do that.
My understanding is that Mr. Bashir continually tried to approach him, and my understanding was always that Mr. Bashir had written a book about Princess Diana, and Michael had great affection for Princess Diana. He really, really liked her. He liked the fact that she wasn't willing just to sit back and enjoy her wealth and fame, that she wanted to help the world. She wanted to go to Africa to help starving children. She wanted to help children who were victims of landmines that exploded in Eastern Europe. And she really wanted to be different from the group she was part of, the royal group in England. And he really admired her and liked her. And the fact that she would trust Martin Bashir to write a biography about her convinced Michael that he would be trustworthy. And as we know, it was a disaster, an absolute disaster. And Bashir did that interview, and Michael was smart enough to have his own videographer at every interview. And that made a big difference in the trial because the prosecution, got the judge's permission to play that interview, one version of it. I believe it was the British version, which the judge thought was a little less inflammatory than the American version. And we had tried to get from Mr. Bashir's company the footage that wasn't included, and they wouldn't give it to us. But because Michael had the foresight to have his own videographer there, we had the portions that were not included. And when the prosecution played their version of the interview, we were able, in our case, we got the judge's permission to play the outtakes that had not been included. And, Mr. Bashir did not look too good. When you put together the statements he made in the edited documentary with some of the statements he made in the footage that wasn't included, he looked pretty bad. And also, there were portions that were not included where Michael said he would slit his wrists before he would hurt a child, and he denied, all of these false charges. I don't think very much of Mr. Bashir. The day Michael died, I was in court. My partner Susan, you and I were trying a federal criminal case in downtown Los Angeles. And I came out of the courthouse and was told that Michael had passed away, and I was hoping it was a rumor because he was always being subjected to false rumors. And I called my office, and one of the first messages was from Mr. Bashir, where he made a statement that he'd never meant to hurt anyone. He said he had great respect for me and felt terrible that Michael had passed away and left his number, and, of course, I never called it. I have contempt for Mr. Bashir for what he did to Michael, but that really started this whole case rolling. The fallout from that horrible show is what really got the prosecution, in my opinion, in Santa Barbara and the police interested in putting together a criminal case. And he was He was their first witness. The first prosecution was Martin Bashir.
Mm-hmm. And did he try to stay by his lawyer and try to answer questions, i.e., the Detective Martin from OJ? He had his own lawyer there at present, counsel Tom?
Say that again, Jordan. I didn't hear the whole statement you made.
He had his own lawyer instructing him not to answer some of your questions. I remember you telling me. Is that accurate?
He had a very high-priced, very well-known lawyer from a big law firm in downtown Los Angeles who was instructing him not to answer most of my questions. And he was using what is called a journalistic privilege. There's just like, a client can talk to an attorney and you can't get the attorney to say what the client said. It's called privileged. It's protected from disclosure. There's also a journalistic privilege where if a journalist talks to someone, what they discuss can be protected from disclosure. So he had his attorney instructing him to assert the journalistic privilege and not to answer, and he looked terrible. He really did. Well, there were a lot of people following the case who thought the prosecution had tampered with evidence. And what I think you're referring to is that in the grand jury room, there was a belief that Gavin Arvizo was allowed to touch some magazines and get his fingerprints on them. And then during the trial, part of the prosecution's case was built on the fact that his fingerprints were on these magazines because the allegation was that Michael had showed him these, Playboy-type magazines. The prosecutor was claiming he showed it to him as a way to sort of warm up for, molestation. That was the idea. So that was an allegation that the judge didn't accept. As far as falsifying evidence, that was the only allegation I remember at this point, was the question of where did Arvizo's fingerprints, how did they get on the magazine?
Yeah.
So that's, can you get prosecuted for tampering with evidence? Absolutely. You can be prosecuted for obstruction of justice, for evidence tampering. That can be a serious felony if it's proven.
Oh, so the judge didn't accept it, and that's why no charges were brought?
That didn't go anywhere. Yeah, that didn't go anywhere, the allegation.
Oh,
but certainly it was something that we raised.
All right.
That prosecutor was out for blood based on all this that is coming out.
Well, I'll tell you, they threw every resource they could find. I mean, when the FBI reports came out, 3 or 4 years ago, you see a lot of meetings with the prosecutors from Santa Barbara. They're flying across country, meeting with the FBI agents. The resources they threw at this. When they go after someone, suspected of murder, they don't have 70 sheriffs raid their home. I mean, this was an all-out assault on Michael Jackson. They were determined to put him behind bars.
What a waste of money.
I agree with you completely. You know, I saw This Is It 3 times, and I could keep seeing it if I had the time to. I mean, Michael was magic. He was magic. He was kindness. He was generosity. He was sensitivity. He was great artistry. All of this rolled into one person. And he just was not content to be a success. He had to help heal the world. He had to help people in distress. He wanted children to find love and direction, you know, where they may not have it otherwise. And he was just a one of a kind. And I think all of us who had the honor and privilege of meeting him and understanding what kind of a person he really was feel blessed. You know, he left blessings everywhere. He just did. And these artists who you have quoted, they've summed it up very well. We're all privileged and honored to have crossed his path. We're privileged and honored to have known this very special human being. And his artistry and his kindness, his spirituality, his generosity, his magic will live for a long time, let me tell you. Thank you very much for inviting me, and best of luck. It's a great show, and you really go an extra effort, Jordan, to just spread the message that this was a very special, kind, unique human being who often was unfairly attacked and unfairly exploited. And you, more than anyone else I can think of in the media, have made an extra effort to do your research, do your homework to spread the word. So congratulations to you and to all the callers and all the listeners who love Michael Jackson. You're all special people. Thank you.